Hey guys, it's Double BMTG. I'm not actually going to be playing any matches today in this video. I'm just going to try and explain the rationale behind sideboarding. I've played a bunch of different decks in different formats, and I've had guides by very, very good players that basically give you a card for card in out in most matchups, like the top 20 meta decks or so. And I think that there's a real problem with that because if you just look at those guides, you often don't understand the rationale behind the choices for cards that are taken in and taken out, which then leads to once there's a meta shift or a new deck pops up, and then you face that, and you don't really know what you're supposed to sideboard. With Tortured Existence, it's kind of simple, but also the deck is a little bit complex. So I'm gonna give a rundown of a couple decks, what you take in, take out, and then I'm gonna explain really why. First, I'm just gonna start with Fairies. It's pretty much the same in all Fairies matchups. You take out Spore Frog. Fairies is a card advantage matchup. Spore Frog is negative card advantage. Their clock generally does not matter. So you want Spore Frog out in that matchup basically every single time. Thorn is also a card that sometimes comes out in these aggro matchups, but it's also just a very, very good card in kind of integral to the deck. So you might want to consider keeping it in. Fume Spitter is good against 1/1s. Fairies plays a million 1/1s, so you obviously want to keep that one in. Crypt Rats, you generally want to keep in because they fill up their board reasonably quickly. Kitchen Imp is the whole reason why it is a extremely good matchup. So let's look at our sideboard and just think, because we're definitely going to be taking out 3 Spore Frogs against every Fairies matchup. So what do you want to bring in? Well, I've got 3 Scattershot Archers in my sideboard right now just for Fairies, basically. And it's a very, very clean 3 in, 3 out. Now, let's look at the other cards in my sideboard. Because there are some that are reasonable against Fairies. The main one is Augur of Skulls, because they are a heavily hand dependent deck. They hold up counter spells, they hold up removal spells, and this will help chew down and eat away that hand. And you might look at this and you think, well, do I really want to take anything else out? And if so, what do I want to take out? Well, the Tanuki is a card that you'll sideboard out a lot. It's good in general. It's a strong mid-rangey card. It can be a late-game threat, and it can also ramp you up on mana when you don't have a Sakura Tri-Builder. It's like a 5th Sakura Tri-Builder that you can also hit with Commune with the Spirits. It's a good card, but against Fairies, it's a little bit slow, and you probably want an Augur instead. And looking at all these cards, will there be anything worse than Augur of Skulls? Maybe one of these Crypt Rats, right? Crypt Rats dies to removal spells and gets counterspelled. So if especially they're playing blue-red Fae, they'll have lightning bolts that will be able to very easily kill Crypt Rats. You might want to play both of your Augur of Skulls. I think that this is a very simple and easy way to think about the Fairies matchup. Now let's think about some other ones. Burn, Boros, like let's just go ahead and think about all of the life total control type decks, you know, that are going to try to aggro you down really, really quickly and use lightning bolts and lava spikes and all those cards to kill you. Very simply, Knot of the Bone and Golgari Brown Scale. Very, very easy. In these matchups as well, generally, Spore Frog's not very good. Crypt Rats, also not very good. because they mostly do not play a lot of creatures that attack you. And if they do, it'll be for like, 3 damage. They'll swing for 3, and you'll block 3 damage, but then you'll be minus a card, and it won't really help you very much. Crypt Rats obviously deals damage to yourself, so it's not good against burn. So let's look at these. What's good? What can I bring in for this? Augur of Skulls, again, is perfectly fine. We'll usually take a removal spell. They'll have to lightning bolt the augur, or they'll get 2 burn spells stripped out of their hand. It's pretty strong. And then depending on what they're playing, like if they're playing maybe mono red burn, we know that they are going to have Curse of the Pierced Heart, which is quite strong against us. We might just go ahead and bring in Masked Vandals. Or if they're playing something like Boros Aggro, we know that there's a good chance that they have the ability to kill one of our Tortured Existences. So we maybe bring in this. It just really depends, but these are the basic 4 cards that you're pretty much always going to bring in, and these are the basic 6 cards that you're pretty much always going to take out in those matchups. Now let's think about combo. Combo is obviously very strong. You've got Familiars, you've got Tron, you've got Goblins. What do we bring in against these? We got Cycle Storm. So let's first take a look at what you do against Graveyard combo decks, especially Cycle Storm, Goblins. Familiars is a little bit of a Graveyard deck, but just especially Goblins and Cycle Storm. Fairy Macabre and Augur of Skulls, that's just the name of the game. That's what you're doing. Now there is some difference in these matchups. Like Cycle Storm is not very affected by Fume Spitter or Crypt Rats, but Familiars, you need Crypt Rats. Familiars is a matchup where you would like kind of want the 4th Crypt Rats in your board, because you get to kill their whole board, and they are a deck that's dependent on getting a bunch of creatures on the board and then looping value with them. So Crypt Rats is extremely good against that deck. It's also okay against Goblins, definitely not great, but your Fume Spitters and Crypt Rats are actually good in those matchups. So you would maybe instead want to take out a Tanuki, maybe take out a Kitchen Imp. Maybe against Goblins, we know that they have some artifact lands, so you might want to bring in Masked Vandals. Take out a couple more of these. Crypt Rats is not that good in that matchup, so you maybe take out one. It's just you really have to think about what your deck is trying to do and your win condition, especially in these hard matchups. And usually it's going to be based around getting Tortured Existence out, getting a small clock, maybe ramping up on mana, getting some creature removal stuck on the board, and holding Fairy Macabre, and then possibly looping Fairy Macabre, getting extra value with Grave Scrabbler, maybe getting the Monarch while you've got board control. It's a little bit it's a little bit difficult sometimes picking the exact sideboard, so you just really need to understand the concepts of these cards are generally good, especially these 5 against those Graveyard combo decks. Now let's think about the maybe control, like more controlling mid-range matchups. Jeskai Ephemerate, Dimir control, like the slower Boros decks with the Battle Screech. These are all different. You definitely have different ways of sideboarding against them. Yeah, these decks are kind of difficult to sideboard against a lot of the time. Usually Augur of Skulls is going to be fine against them. Usually Spore Frog is going to be really bad against them. So doing something like this, if they are an artifact deck, maybe taking out Crypt Rats or Fume Spitter. Fume Spitter is usually not very good in these matchups. Doing something like this against, say, the Cleansing Wildfire Rakdos with a green splash. Something against that deck would be this. Maybe like Dimir Control. I know that they play Gurmag Angler, so you might want to bring in a Fairy Macabre too. Masked Vandals aren't exactly going to do a whole lot. Fume Spitter's not going to do a whole lot. So you maybe bring in Brown Scale as just another dredger. The life gain's not going to be very helpful, but it's probably a better card than all of these. It's not like set in stone, and you gotta feel it out what would be right in that particular matchup. And now for just the straight up aggression type decks. Bogles, mono green aggro, slivers, mono white heroic. Just the decks that are going to shove damage at your face. They have very minimal interaction. Spore Frog is your best friend. Spore Frog is the single best card in your deck in all of these matchups, right? Game 1, you're going to want to try to loop Spore Frog and win, okay? And then games 2 and 3, on the other hand, all of these green decks, Bogles, mono green aggro, and mono white heroic, all have enchantment removal, at least a little bit. This list that got 5-0 only has one. It only has one. Sometimes they have a little bit more than that. Let's see what mono green aggro is packing. Mono green aggro has four enchant removal spells. You've got to know that when you're coming in. This is the whole reason why we've got, see, 4 enchantment removal spells, and yeah, sometimes they even play an extra 1 or 2. Sometimes they'll come in with a lot of enchantment removal. But all of these aggro decks play a little bit of it. This is the whole reason we have Tamiyo's Safekeeping. You're going to want to bring this in those matchups, because your win condition is still Tortured Existence looping Spore Frog. And if they kill the Tortured Existence, they'll just run you over. But if you can Tamiyo's, you've got that 2 extra life gain that'll help you stay alive against these aggro decks, and it'll keep your Torex alive. Now, what would we want to take out? Probably some of the slower cards. Tanuki, we maybe want Thorn still, maybe not. Might want to take out Fume Spitter, especially it's not very good against like mono white heroic. It's not very good against Bogles. And let's say we're playing against Bogles, we'll definitely be bringing in our enchantment removal. And Masked Vandal's really good in all of these matchups, because mono green aggro plays Rancor and Elephant Guide. It's okay against mono white heroic. They have a bunch of tiny enchantments. It's not very good against most of these because they're all 1 mana. But hitting an ethereal armor is still nice. It's still usually going to be better than maybe Crypt Rats, because they'll just make their creatures so big that Crypt Rats won't be able to kill them. They have all of these protection from colored sources. So Crypt Rats probably isn't going to be as good as Masked Vandal. And Scattershot Archer is also a serious card that you could think about putting in. It'll kill Vault Scourge. It'll kill a Crone Skyguard. It'll kill Vault Scourge in mono green aggro, which is definitely an annoying card. But you might want to just stick to something more like this. Golgari Brown Scale for a little bit of extra life gain. You can consider Augur of Skulls in these matchups. It's usually not very good. They get empty-handed pretty quickly. But your bread and butter in these aggro matchups is Spore Frog Torex, protected by Tamiyo's, Masked Vandal to slow them down, be a 1/3 body, kill their enchantments, maybe a Golgari Brown Scale, maybe a Gnaw to the Bone if you really feel like it. But this sort of sideboarding is what you're going to want to do in these matchups. And then for let's say just the random decks out there, like let's say, okay, they've got Pestilence, they've got Walls, there's some land destruction stuff. You really just gotta feel it out in these matchups. Against Pestilence, you're gonna want all the good value things. You're gonna want to kill their enchantments, their artifacts with Masked Vandal. You're probably gonna want to be able to protect Tortured Existence. They might have some enchantment removal. Let's take a look. Yep, they've definitely got some enchantment removal here. So Tamiyo's is a pretty good card. Spore Frog, not very good. Crypt Rats, not very good. Fume Spitter, not very good. All of your value cards and your graveyard engines and the cards that find Torex, all very good in these matchups. Maybe just go ahead and do something like this. You know, just something simple like this. Basically all the good cards, all the grindy cards, all the cards that kill their cards, and a couple things to protect Torex. And then Wall's Cascade is similar to Familiars, except they don't really do much with the graveyard, if anything. That matchup is just a Crypt Rats matchup. If you have Crypt Rats and manage to blow up all their walls, you win the game. So you just play around that and you sideboard towards that. Your deck doesn't really change a lot there. Maybe you bring in Augur. Maybe you take out 2 Spore Frogs. It usually doesn't do a whole lot in that matchup. They usually bring in like Ulamog's Crusher in their sideboards, or they'll just infinite combo you, or they've got it in the main deck in that list. And then against all these fair matchups, Gruul midrange, Monarch, Jund midrange, Mardu quote unquote aggro. It just depends. It just depends, and you've got to think about these because there will always be rogue decks in Pauper. You can't have a specific sideboard in-out plan against every single one of them. But these basic concepts of Spore Frog's bad in a lot of matchups. You're gonna want to think about bringing that out. Crypt Rat's bad in some matchups. Fume Spitter's bad in some matchups. Kitchen Imp is bad against combo decks a lot of the time. Tanuki's a little bit slow, not very strong in a lot of matchups. These are generally like the cards that you're going to want to think about taking out sometimes. Everything else pretty much stays. You can think about cutting one of these. All of this is pretty much 100% has to be in the deck. You can maybe think about cutting Thorn sometimes, but it's just something that you have to think about from matchup to matchup. And once you get good at it, you'll really start having success with Tortured Existence, because this is a control deck, and control decks should get stronger post board once you get to tech towards the matchup. I hope that this has helped. I got a comment asking for sideboard guides, and I think that this is a little bit more helpful than just telling you these are the 6 cards you want to take out, these are the 6 cards that you want to bring in, especially when even Fairies might get a new card in an upcoming set and their whole deck changes, and then our list has to change, and then our sideboarding has to change, and it'd be a whole lot better if we just understood the ideas behind why we're taking things out and bringing things in. Well, I'll see you guys in the next league.